just tell the truth and trust in the American people that over time they're going to know what the truth is.
Yes, it is time for the truth. Right here, right now. This is the Conservative Syndicate. Real conservative talk from real conservatives. With your host, John Matthews.
The latter-day prophet. Baying against the hypocrisies of our time.
And Joe Akos.
You want answers. I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
The Conservative Syndicate is comprised of some of the most informed pundits and activists available today. Together, we seek to tear down the imaginary wall, a separation between church and state through education, information, and engagement on the religion of politics and the politics of religion. And now, your host on the globally syndicated Conservative Syndicate, John Matthews and Joe Akos.
And how are we doing? Another fine day, another fine show right here at the Conservative Syndicate. We're glad to have you with us, and we have something once again special just for you, our listeners. In the spirit of Thanksgiving, we are grateful that God has heard our prayers to stop the arterial bleeding known as progressivism, and hope he continues to provide us with a path back to becoming once again one nation under God. So for your educational and entertainment purposes, we are providing a series called Great Speeches and Debates of Days Past. Tonight, we wish to feature three of America's conservative icons: Mark Levin, host of The Mark Levin Show, and former Chief of Staff for the Attorney General, and former Chief of Staff for Attorney General Edmund Meese under the Reagan administration. Mark is also president of the Landmark Legal Foundation. He has authored 6 books and contributes commentary to various media outlets such as the National Review Online. And on September 1st of 2015, Levin was named editor-in-chief of Conservative Review. The first speech we'll hear tonight is his appearance at just last year, the 2016 Conservative Convention, followed by an impassioned speech at the State and Nation Policy Summit during the American Legislative Exchange Council Conference, December 4th, 2014, where he advocates for state legislators to use Article 5 of the Constitution as intended to rein in runaway federal government. Second, we'll hear a debate between conservative icon William F. Buckley and socialist community organizer Saul Alinsky, the man considered by many to be responsible for the likes of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. And finally, conservative thinker, author, and contributor Thomas Sowell, speaking at the Hoover Institute in 2010 on his book, Dismantling America. So having with all that, we just want to hope that you get something out of all these speeches here in our series. And without further ado, let's get going here. We'll start off with Mark Levin at the Conservative Conference of 2016, of this year actually, 2016.
Well, I want to thank you all for coming here. Conservative Review inaugural Conservative Convention. Well, you haven't heard me yet. We're here today to make it crystal clear, not only in South Carolina, but across the country, that we are proud, true, unapologetic conservatives. We are not going to take a back seat to anyone, any group, or any political party. From this place forward, we will demonstrate the will, the strength, and the wisdom of our movement, and we declare here and now that it will be our solemn mission to wrench this great republic from the iron grip of the statists in both parties and their surrogates in the federal courts and in the federal bureaucracy. We are not anarchists. We are constitutionalists. We do not seek to fundamentally transform our country. We seek to take our country back from those who fundamentally screwed it up. Now, the left rules by the mob and by imperial fiat alike. They are relentless. When they win elections, they claim a mandate from the people. When they lose elections, they rule through unelected branches of government. And too often this tyranny is acquiesced to and views as the inevitable decline of the American Republic. We're supposed to go as the Greek and Roman republics went. I say nuts. We conservatives, we Americans, we the people, we are the progeny of the American Revolution. An 8.5-year bloody war for independence and liberty against the most powerful nation on the face of the earth. And we remember the heroes who fought at Lexington and Concord and Bunker Hill and Yorktown and all the other battles. We are the children and the grandchildren of the heroes who defeated Hitler and Tojo and Mussolini. We are the fathers, mothers, brothers, and sisters of the heroes who are fighting the Islamic genocidal murders from one hellhole to the next. We are the American people, and we're different from other people. And in all these wars, and all these battles, all the blood, all the suffering, what were these patriots fighting for? Food stamps? The Department of Education? From the Revolution to today, they were and are fighting for liberty. For the Constitution, for the Republic. Now, in context, this makes our political and cultural battles here at home seem a lot easier. Although they're nonviolent, in fact, they're more complicated. The statists use the instrumentalities of a free people against them. In other words, the institutions that grew out of the civil society are turned against the civil society. So our principles, beliefs, and values are crucially important. They're the antidote to the soft but growing tyranny. And if anyone is confused about what we conservatives mean by our principles, beliefs, and values, they can consult the Bible, the Declaration of Independence, and the Constitution. Now, we're in the middle of a difficult battle. It's even a daunting battle. And some have already surrendered with pronouncement that conservatism has failed, or that conservatism needs to be modernized and updated with populism and nationalism. Bullcrap. Let me remind you that despite all of it, conservatism has scored significant victories. Where is the Soviet Union today? It's dead. Reagan pushed the communists out of Central America. He pushed the communists out of Angola. He pushed the communists out of Moscow. He pushed the communists out of East Germany. Conservatism works. And Reagan created nationally syndicated conservative talk radio by deregulating broadcasting. Conservatism gave us the late, great Antonin Scalia. The problem is not the failure of conservatism. The problem is those who proclaim conservatism to get elected and then reject it once elected. In the last 100 years, there have been essentially two conservative presidents, Calvin Coolidge and Ronald Reagan. Hey, look, I'm not a politician. I'm reading my speech. That's the way it is. I don't give a lot of speeches. But on the other hand, unlike Obama, I write my own speeches. And I want the president to know I have a pen too. And even more, we have what's called the Constitution. You can have your pen. We'll keep our Constitution. I even have an Obama phone somewhere here, I think. That's pretty good. So we've had basically two conservative presidents in a century who've held office for 15 years combined. What do you say we elect a third one? We need to give the American people a choice between liberty and tyranny, between capitalism and socialism, between constitutionalism and lawlessness, between national security and appeasement, and between faith and secularism. Now is not the time for compromise. Now is the time for victory. I'm fond of quoting Thomas Paine. Reagan was fond of quoting Thomas Paine. George Washington was fond of quoting Thomas Paine. As a matter of fact, the night before the Battle of Trenton, on December 23, Thomas Paine wrote in part these words: "These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of their country. But he that stands by it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman." Washington read that and more to the troops before the Battle of Trenton. Their backs were literally against it. The British were on the move. He had just fled New York. The British figured they had him pinned down, what was left of the American colonists, against the Delaware River. The Washington outwitted them. And you know the story of the Battle of Trenton. Way too many American patriots and conservatives are prepared to surrender their liberty, are prepared to accept the muddledness of candidates who are running in this primary, and the recent conversion to sudden principles that they never held before in their lives. This is not a time to take chances. We're not befuddled and confounded about this, are we? We've said time and time and time again we need a conservative, haven't we? We have a conservative, don't we? It's time for all conservatives to come home now and do the right thing. And if you're a conservative, you know what the right thing is. And you know what I mean. This election in South Carolina is very, very important. The election in every state is very, very important. We have to fight in each and every one of them. We will lose some, we will win some. But in the end, we need to win. We cannot leave it. We cannot leave it to commentators on TV. We cannot leave this election to people in Washington, D.C. who pull the strings of other candidates. We cannot leave it to others to determine our fate. This is the time, in the middle of a primary, this is the time to stand up and be heard. This is the time to make sure your family and your friends and your neighbors show up and do the right thing. Each and every one of you is a Paul or Paulette Revere. Each and every one of you need to take this message throughout your community, throughout your neighborhood. Each and every one of you are responsible not only for your own votes, but the votes of your family and your friends and your community. Nobody can stop us if we don't stop ourselves. God bless you, and God bless America, and thank you for coming.
This is the Conservative Syndicate, real conservative talk from real conservatives. We hope you are enjoying tonight's segment of great speeches and debates of days past. That was Mark Levin at this year's Conservative Conference. We'll be right back with another great speech from Mark Levin after these brief messages. A healthy attitude toward politics will always be relentlessly cynical. TheConservativeSyndicate.net, doing our part to keep America healthy.
When our water heater broke down last month, it was a nightmare. It took 5 hours for the plumber to show up, and he charged us a couple of $100 just to come out. And then it cost another $1,800 to put in the new water heater. By the time it was all said and done, I felt like I'd been taken. But what else could I do?
The smartest thing you can do is get a home warranty from American Residential Warranty. Their home warranties pay to repair or replace all your major appliances when they break, and they will break, and at the worst possible time. Call American Residential Warranty right now for free information on home warranties starting at just pennies a day. Don't wait for your refrigerator to stop running or your ceiling fans to stop turning. Call American Residential Warranty right now. Ask how you can save up to 50% on washer and dryer coverage. Just call 1-800-790-5960. That's 1-800-790-5960. Again, 1-800-790-5960. Call now.
Limited time offer, 24-month commitment and credit qualification require cancellation fee, auto pay, and paperless billing, and other restrictions apply. If you can't see the difference, why pay the difference? Switch to Dish for the best deal in entertainment. Only Dish brings you the best in entertainment for less than $20 a month. Cut the cable and don't get directed. Switch to Dish because at just $19.99, Dish saves you every time you turn on the TV. It's so simple. The same channels cost less with Dish. So since you can't see the difference, don't pay the difference. Switch to Dish for the best deal in entertainment. Get premium movie channels free for 3 months, starting at just $19.99. Dish saves you every time you turn on the TV. Call now to save with Dish. Dial 1-800-600-1645. That's 1-800-600-1645. The same channels for less than $20 a month. Dish. Call 1-800-600-1645 for details.
Attention taxpayers. If you've received a notice from the IRS or state, do not ignore it. It's also a big mistake to try and handle your tax problem on your own. If you owe back taxes, it's a fact that the government has the power to take everything you own, including your home, business, wages, savings, and your freedom. But here's the good news. There's a special toll-free tax hotline set up especially for you. This tax hotline will tell you about new programs that are geared to help you dramatically settle, reduce, or eliminate what you owe. But you have to call now. Take down this number or put it in your cell phone. But call 866-761-0959. 1-866-761-0959. When you call, you get free information on how you can reduce or eliminate back taxes, including penalties and interest. You can also be helped if you have unfiled returns, a tax lien, wage garnishment, bank levy, or if you've been entered into a payment plan but can't make the payments. Don't make the big mistake in thinking you can ignore or handle your tax problem on your own. You can stop the collection process immediately. Call this special tax hotline today for free info at 1-866-761-0959. That's 1-866-761-0959. 1-866-761-0959.
This is a Conservative Syndicate, real conservative talk from real conservatives. Once again, we hope you are enjoying tonight's segment of great speeches and debates of days past. Next up is Mark Levin speaking at the State and Nation Policy Summit during the American Legislative Exchange Council Conference on December 4th, 2014, where he advocates for state legislators to use Article 5 of the Constitution as intended to rein in a runaway federal government.
It is an enormous honor to be here, or I wouldn't be in Washington, I'll tell you that. I avoid it like the plague. This is a wonderful organization, Alec, which is why it's under attack. Anything that's worthwhile now in this country is under attack. You as individual representatives, you're under attack too. Too bad, so be it. It's an honor to follow Mark Meckler, who is the inspiration behind this movement. And this movement is nothing less than to restore the Republic. Now, we can beat our chests about election victories all we want. We can go on and complain about federal mandates and the EPA and all the rest. Now, what the hell are we going to do about it? The Democrats in Congress and the President, they don't believe in America's founding principles. That's what fundamental transformation means. If you believe in America's founding principles, what are you trying to fundamentally transform? And unfortunately, the Republicans in Congress don't believe in defending them. The President dismissed last month's election because he lost it. Now he claims to represent the people who didn't vote. The Republicans are more fearful of a temporary government shutdown, where 17% of the government is closed and Americans are utterly unaffected by it, than the evisceration of the Constitution, the separation of powers, Article 1, their own power, power of the purse, and decisions about naturalization. Laws are rewritten and unenforced by a president. Congress confers legislative powers on departments and agencies and bureaucrats of their creation, which in turn seize further power to legislate in ways that usurp you, the states, your people. The courts have claimed the final say on any issues in which the courts want to have the final say, including virtually every so-called social issue that may arise, and any other issue it decides to take on. Wide-ranging decisions affecting virtually every aspect of life are being made by fewer and fewer masterminds in Washington, D.C., in an increasingly centralized federal government, using a growing army of bureaucrats, a fourth branch of government, if you will, to institute and enforce them. More and more of what the federal government does is insulated from elections. If elections are won that advance the left's agenda, then they're celebrated. If they lose the elections are denounced as temporary inconveniences, and then they turn to the unelected federal institutions to advance their agenda. In other words, the trajectory toward utopian statism, concentrated power, centralized government is never really checked or actually reversed. And the reason is, and the sad truth is, that we live largely under a post-constitutional government. This is no longer a federal republic or a constitutional republic or a representative republic. The federal, constitutional, and representative character of the national government have been and are being dismantled. We are mutating into something else. So those who say, I love our Constitution and I don't want to change it, and I believe they are the true guardians of the Republic, they're deluding themselves. In Washington today, we have an ongoing constitutional convention where one branch or another or the federal bureaucracy act far outside the limits imposed on them by the Constitution. And rather than the branches checking and balancing each other, they usually reinforce each other. And as lawless precedent is built upon lawless precedent, what remains of the Constitution's firewalls are breached. And my question to you is, where does this end? Well, I'll tell you where it ends. With you. We are not without recourse. But the recourse is not in Washington, D.C. It's not in federal elections. Why the hell would the very people who've done this to us reverse course? They like what they're doing, and they're going to keep doing it unless somebody speaks out and acts against them. And that's you. There's nobody else. I said in the Liberty Amendments that I know there are those who insist that electing the right president and Congress and appointing the right justices is not only more practicable but preferable to amending the Constitution. And they will cling to a particular election or judicial decision as evidence of vibrant republicanism, diluted by short respites and interludes to escape the intellectual and practical reality of this societal transformation. I'm all for electing candidates and confirming justices who are faithful to the Constitution. But let us acknowledge the infrequency of these occurrences and greater rarity of fidelity by these officials, once ensconced in high office, to constitutional boundaries. In fact, even if the most virtuous and resourceful among them do not, and cannot possess the aptitude and muscle to penetrate the daunting entrenchment and institutional apparatuses of the federal government. Furthermore, the increasingly and significantly cloistered operations of the federal branches, the willful concealment of deliberations, the delegation of power to elusive and unaccountable bureaucracies, and the centralization and concentration of authority are all intended to evade the Constitution, confound the citizen, and suppress self-government. This is a systemic problem that is bigger than any single federal election or administration. Meanwhile, the federal operating debt just passed $18 trillion and nobody gives a damn. Federal unfunded liabilities far exceed $100 trillion. The federal bureaucracy issues thousands of regulations each year. It just issued 3,445, which will affect every one of your states, and you'll be holding subcommittee hearings and committee hearings, and you're going to be all wound up with what some jerk in the EPA decided to do to you. And they cost in excess of $1 trillion a year. The GAO, the CBO, the Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid trustees and actuaries all tell us over and over again that what they're doing is unsustainable, meaning it will collapse our economic system and society. A total catastrophe. And nothing is being done about it. Today, the federal government is the nation's largest creditor, debtor, lender, employer, consumer, grantor, property owner, tenant, insurer, health care provider, and pension guarantor. Does that sound like limited government to you? The issue is no longer what matters the federal government is involved in, but what matters it's not involved in. And you state officials have absolutely no say and no power once the federal government claims the power to act. Period. In fact, you are mostly irrelevant once the federal government decides to act. And so are we the people. Like much of the rest of the Constitution, the 10th Amendment is mostly ignored, and federalism is essentially dead. But there is recourse. There's a way to restore the Republic, the Constitution, and the civil society. And only you and your colleagues in the state legislatures have the constitutional and lawful authority to do it. Nobody else, and nobody else will do it. Do you realize that acting together, the state legislatures have more power than the entire federal government? Do you realize that if less than 70 of you, I don't know how, there are hundreds of you here, if less than 70 of you serving as delegates, two from just 2/3 of the state legislatures, had a meeting in a room like this, sent here by your state legislatures to address specific issues of great gravity to the nation, do you realize what that would do to this country in a positive and significant way? They wouldn't be focusing on Congress or the latest judicial fiat or the president with his pen and his phone or the EPA. 70 of you, less than 70 of you, in one room, sent here by your state legislatures, not to destroy the Constitution, but to save it, would have more power than everything that surrounds this building today. And like the framers, you don't seek power to advance your own agenda and for self-aggrandizement. You seek power to control power. George Washington could have been a dictator. He chose not to be. This country could have been very, very different. You're of that ilk. You're of that mindset. That's why you're here at ALEC today. Do you realize that you are empowered by a specific constitutional grant of authority? You, under Article 5, to save your nation from an out-of-control national government? Do you realize there can never be a runaway convention? Never, ever. It's impossible. Since 3/4 of the states must ratify whatever is proposed by the delegates sent by 2/3 of the states to a convention. Do you know what a convention is? It's a meeting. That's what it is. And all you do is you propose specific amendments, and the states consider them or reject them. Congress does this. It's done it before. Now you do it. It's your turn. That's why it's in there. The Convention of the States process is quintessential federalism. It's the purest form of representative government we have in this nation. And it bypasses the federal branches of the national government, and that was exactly the purpose. So I want you to understand that you as individuals, each of you, have a duty under the federal Constitution. You have a duty under the federal Constitution of the United States to this republic. You have a duty to save it. You have a capacity as state representatives and state senators, you alone, not your governors, not congressmen, not senators, not the president, not the courts, but you have it within yourselves. And it ought to be your number one priority when you leave here, to help restore this republic and give us our Constitution back. This grant of power was drafted not by Mark Meckler, not by Mike Farris, not by two great professors, Barnett and Adelson, but by the same framers of the Constitution that drafted the rest of it. It's drafted in Philadelphia and approved by the delegates. Article 5 is part of the Constitution that was endorsed in the Federalist Papers. It was ratified by every single state convention. And in modern times, It has been championed by such notable public figures as Dwight Eisenhower, Everett Dirksen, Milton Friedman, and numerous others. We're not some cult over here. We're the majority. We're not some extreme group, hard right group over here. We're constitutionalists. We're not some wackos over here. We embrace the American heritage. We are the ones trying to lead an effort to save what's left of this country.
This is the Conservative Syndicate, real conservative talk from real conservatives. We hope you are enjoying tonight's segment of great speeches and debates of days past. We'll be right back after these brief messages.
State Talk Radio, WRS Cleveland.
Hey, I'll make you a deal. Give me 60 seconds and I'll give you directions to the Fountain of Youth. Okay, I'm joking. Well, kind of joking. No fountains, but youth, I got. Nature's Youth and their premier anti-aging product, Nature's Youth RSF. With your sensible diet and exercise plan, Nature's Youth RSF can help you look and feel better. RSF is an all-natural amino acid supplement that supports your body to naturally increase HGH levels without any synthetic hormones. And elevated HGH levels can contribute to increased energy, improved libido, reduced body fat, and improved exercise capacity. Let's be honest. Who doesn't want to look and feel younger? Visit the newly designed website at naturesyouth.com or call 800-333-6923. That's 800-333-6923 and like them on Facebook and you'll be included in contest and exclusive offers. What a deal. Oh, speaking of deals, my time's about up. 800-333-6923 or naturesyouth.com. Who needs a fountain anyway? Call today.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
When I had a heart attack at 42, I was not sure what the future held. But a year later, the doctors could find nothing wrong with me and took me off all my medication. What did I do? I took a herbal mixture of garlic, cayenne, and a few other herbs mixed in liquid form. I now call this Extendovite. I would have never believed that a few simple herbs could actually change my life like they did. Now it's your turn to see what the powers of garlic and cayenne can do for you. For only $69.95 plus shipping and handling for a 2-month supply of either capsules or liquid, you too can begin on your path to better health. For more information, call 1-877-928-8822. That's 1-877-928-8822. Or visit our website at heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
I've owned my company for 14 years now, and I can tell you that payroll is a 4-letter word. I hate doing it. It eats up hours I don't have, and it costs me money I could be saving. But my accountant's too expensive, and I'm not sure who to call, but I know I need help.
We're Paychex, and we take all the hassles out of small business payroll. We save you time and money. It's easy. Call, fax, or give us your payroll information securely online, and we take care of the rest. We calculate the correct taxes, manage payments and direct deposits. We even send out your checks. Payroll doesn't need to be a 4-letter word anymore. We're so sure that we can save you time and money that we'll give you a month's payroll free. Just for calling 877-663-3830. Get 1 month's payroll for free. Call Paychex right now. 877-663-3830. That's 877-663-3830.
Hey, I don't back anybody unless I believe in them. And I do believe in the value of investing in gold and silver. And the company I trust to buy my gold and silver from is Swiss America. I've been working with them for nearly a decade. I trust them, and you can too. Swiss America will help you sort through and find the best options available when you're considering investing in gold and silver coins. Listen, for over 30 years, Swiss America has been offering Americans what they want in their investments: safety, liquidity, quality, reliability, and a potential profit. Gold and silver have a place in every investor's portfolio. So, why not let Swiss America help you diversify your investment portfolio now? Call now for free information. 800-978-3907, 800-978-3907, 800-978-3907, 800-978-3907.
Hey, Bugsy, you hear the news about Vinny?
Yeah, it's a real shame he owed money to the IRS and they finally cut up with him.
Just like Al Capone.
If the IRS can get to Capone, imagine what they can do to little old Vinny, huh?
Poor cat, he was on top of the world, then bada boom, bada bing.
What Vinny needs now is an offer he can't refuse.
Hey, you got a tax problem? Does the IRS claim you owe them a bunch of dough? They can get you too. So call the tax relief line now and learn if you qualify to negotiate your $10,000 plus IRS tax debt for up to a 75% savings. Don't be like Al or Vinny and get busted. Make this free call now. Learn how you may be able to pay the IRS less.
Call now. 866-657-8474. 866-657-8474. 866-657-8474. 866-657-8474.
This is the Conservative Syndicate, real conservative talk from real conservatives, and we hope you are enjoying tonight's segment of great speeches and debates of days past. Right now, let's get back to Mark Levin speaking at the State and Nation Policy Summit during the American Legislative Exchange Council Conference, December 4th, 2014.
Now, I want to spend a little time, whatever time I have left, to take the toughest questions that you can muster and address some of your concerns. But let me end with this. Most of the 11 draft amendments that I proposed in my book are a reflection of the framers' intent. That is, their desire and attempt to prevent the concentration and centralization of ubiquitous power in an omnipresent national government, which is exactly what we have today. The entire structure of the Constitution is intended to prevent this occurrence. So if you ask me, what makes you think the federal government will follow amendments to the Constitution if it won't follow the Constitution today, then you don't understand this process. In my case, the answer is by giving the state legislatures the ultimate say on major federal laws, on major federal regulations, on major Supreme Court decisions, should 3/5 of the state legislatures act to override them within a 2-year period, it doesn't much matter if Washington does or doesn't. It matters that you do. The goal is to limit the entrenchment of Washington's ruling class with strict term limits for members of Congress and Supreme Court justices. Furthermore, strict spending, taxing, borrowing restraints would also be imposed on Congress. I don't have time to get into each of these, and you can read them yourselves. But I know there are other groups out there pushing one amendment for balanced budget, or we've got this idea to prevent a runaway convention. I have a suggestion. How many of you are constitutional originalists out there? How many of you believe in the intent of the Constitution as the framers intended? I assume most of you, correct? So why do we need to rewrite what they said? They told us what to do. They told you what to do. Why are we solely focused on a balanced budget amendment when the Supreme Court is a runaway court? Why are we solely focused on a balanced budget amendment when we have other issues that are problematic, like the entrenched ruling class in the bureaucracy? If you're going to go through the process, this process, don't be myopic in my humble opinion. Don't get caught up in one matter. This is a structural, systemic issue. We're trying to restore the Republic and save what's left of the Constitution. Yes, I'm all in favor of these budget issues, but why that and that alone? Well, because, Mark, that's how we can coalesce a group. No, I say you coalesce a group around saving the Republic. That's what you do. And I have wholeheartedly endorsed the Convention of States project. I served as its legal board of reference because they propose a solution that is as big as the problem. And they are promoting state applications for a convention for the purpose of limiting the scope, power, and jurisdiction of the federal government. And that's what needs to be done. And I encourage you to attend the Convention of States panel immediately after this breakfast. You're going to hear from some very brilliant people. And they also have they don't pay me, by the way. I do this because I believe in it. And that's why we're all here. and they have an excellent brochure that you can take with you. There's all kinds of people who are here, and when you leave, who will be available to assist you. But we need as many leaders as we can get to get this done. Well, we're just going to keep whining about what Washington's doing, and they're not going to stop. It's getting worse. Now, I want you to remember one last thing. I want to reiterate it. I didn't invent this language in the Constitution. I didn't invent this movement. The framers did. And I want to remind you of what Article 5 says. The Congress, wherever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to the Constitution or on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, that's you, shall call a convention. What? To change the Constitution fundamentally? No. For proposing amendments, which in either case shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the states or by convention in 3/4 thereof, as the one or the other mode of ratification may be proposed by Congress. You have nothing to fear but inaction. This ongoing constitutional convention in Washington, D.C., they have no intention of stopping. Bluntly, neither party, none of the branches, the fourth branch, they are utterly and completely out of control. September 15th, 2 days before the end of the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, George Mason, the author of the Virginia Declaration of Rights, written 4 to 5 weeks before the Declaration of Independence. The words from the Virginia Declaration of Rights, borrowed from Thomas Jefferson and the others on the drafting committee to write the Declaration of Independence. George Mason gets up at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. He's troubled. He's troubled that only Congress can propose amendments to this Constitution. And he sees this as a huge defect. And according to James Madison, in his notes, he puts it this way. Colonel Mason thought the plan of amending the Constitution exceptional and dangerous, as the proposing of amendments is in both the modes to depend in the first immediately and in the second ultimately on Congress. No amendments of the proper kind would ever be obtained by the people if the government should become oppressive, as he verily believed would be the case. And he was right. Why do we ignore George Mason today? Why do we ignore the framers of the Constitution in this context? Why do we keep looking for Congress for solutions? Why do state delegates and state senators always want to be federal congressmen and federal senators, when in fact you have the power ultimately, if you'll get together with like-minded members of other legislatures, if you'll throw out the establishment Republicans and others who are stopping you from doing what you need to do. You have an enormous battle in these state capitals. You are the last line of defense of liberty. You're it. There's nowhere else to go. I'm done, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Mr. Levin.
Yeah, that's Mark. Yes,
thank
sir.
you. Thank you for what you do. You're a true patriot. My question is, with an $18 trillion debt, without the Constitutional Convention, what do you see as a timeline for the economy totally collapsing?
All right, let me two things. The people who support centralized government call this process a constitutional convention. I just want to be clear. It is a convention of the states. It's important because all the fearmongers and scaremongers out there, a con-con. The only con-cons are them. So it's convention of the states. That's number one. Number two, I don't know, but I'll tell you this. I don't even know how we're going to dig out of it if we start to dig out of it today. There's so many entrenched interests and so forth, but I suspect it has to be a gradual process if we still have time. And one of the amendments I propose in my book does, as I say in the book, borrows from Milton Friedman, among others, and begins the process of limiting the spending of the federal government to a percentage of the gross domestic product. And so if the economy shrinks, the federal government shrinks. But over time, you want to reduce the percentage the federal government can spend. Right now it's 24-25% to about 17.5-18% if possible. That will go a long way in gradually controlling how much the federal government spends. But I'm not pushing my proposed amendments. I'm just showing you what's possible. But my amendments sort of fit hand in glove. This is why I'm concerned when people say, well, let's just do this. Really? Well, how are you going to control the federal bureaucracy? Well, let's just do the balanced budget amendment. But that's $1.3 trillion. Or how are you going to control Congress? You know, Congress sits as a super legislature over you. Congress was never intended to sit as a super legislature over the state legislatures, second-guessing them on everything. This was Congress's power over here, and this is your power over here. They don't have plenary power. Nobody even asked them. Under what authority are you passing this law? They don't care. Well, that's a state prerogative. They don't care. So to say we're just going to deal with a balanced budget, I think is way too narrow, and people need to focus on all of it. My argument is we need to get back to what the framers intended. Who makes these decisions? Who is going to make these decisions? And the structure of the government means everything. I'll give you another example. What if you pass a so-called balanced budget amendment and the president says, I'm not going to honor it? Like immigration. Well, screw you. Well, what are you going to do about it? Well, don't use the I word. Don't use the power of the purse. Don't do this. Don't do that. So what's the point? I'm saying you make these decisions. And you don't get to make all of these decisions. It's just that if 3/5 of you, under my proposal, the legislatures decide, you know what, this is so out of control, we need to take charge of this issue. These guys in Washington, I mean, I'm rambling a little, but let me ask you this. You're a senator. You're a United States senator. Does your United States senator consult you often, or does he consult the people in Washington more often? Right? It's not like he has a list. Let's see. Do I consult the Senate Majority Leader in Florida, or do I talk to the Chairman of the National Council of La Raza? He'll take that National Council of La Raza first, and maybe get to the state senator, with a 30-second phone call and stop bothering me. This is a huge problem. So you have no voice in Congress. You have no institutional voice in Congress since the 17th Amendment. You have no institutional voice in the courts. You have no institutional courts in the bureaucracy, and you don't have one in the presidency. Who represents the states? Nobody. The whole system has been changed. That needs to be fixed. We need to listen to what the framers of the Constitution said, and we need to be motivated by them. There's a lot of static out there with the media, with Republican officials, with talking heads on TV. I don't know about you. You get so sick of hearing these people. They don't even know what they're talking about. They're in there. They do their talking points, and they leave the studio. You're dealing with real stuff. You're dealing with farmers and ranchers. You're small businessmen and women. Problems on the border. A court, boom, makes a decision and you're out of business. They take over the whole issue for you. Or Congress passes a law, Arizona, and the Supreme Court decides Arizona has no say on immigration within the borders of Arizona. What are you talking about? That's not what the framers said. That's not what the Constitution says. Well, that's what 5 justices said. Actually, it wasn't even 5 justices. Kagan recused herself. So what power does Arizona have? 0. None. So take your power back. That's not a balanced budget issue. That is when they met in in Philadelphia, they didn't just sit there and say, hey, let's talk about balanced budgets. They said, let's talk about liberty. What kind of government do we want to live under? And that's what this Convention of the States is all about. I can see I'm like Obama at a press conference here, but I'll move faster. There you go.
Thank you very much, Mark. State Representative Bob Thorpe from Arizona, where we have no say in the federal government, as you just mentioned. We have there are folks in this audience and back at our state legislatures that are afraid of the CON, the Runaway Convention, and we have a runaway federal government right now. So which one are you going to be more afraid of? A hypothesized runaway convention or an actual runaway federal government? So what I'd like you to do is instill some backbone if there's some folks here that need it.
Let's do it right now.
And talk a little bit about the John Birch Society.
No, I'm not going to.
And how and these folks are detractors and how we have to stand up to these folks. Thank you.
The John Birch Society, what do they have, 14 members? Keep traveling around to the same state capital? I mean, really? You're worried about the John Birch Society? If you're worried about the John Birch Society, let me suggest you shouldn't be here. That's just the thought. Do I worry about the John Birch Society? No. Or any other society for that matter. I would like somebody to stand up and give me an example of how it is even conceivable for there to be a runaway Convention of the States where an amendment is adopted by 3/4 of the legislatures, that somehow all of you are bamboozled. You're so stupid. You can't figure out what to vote for, what to vote against. Only Congress can propose amendments, you see, because these are smart, noble, virtuous people, and they would never run away with anything. But you lowly state delegates and state senators, you're just too stupid to figure this stuff out. So you'll go to this convention, you'll destroy the Constitution, you'll propose it to your fellow state delegates in 3/4 of the states. They're going to say, brilliant, and they're going to vote for it too. Now, how many people believe that's going to happen? So ignore these idiots going on and on and on about fear-mongering and so forth and so on. Now, let me give you another scenario. We have a president of the United States who says, hey, Congress won't act, I will. Excuse me? Congress won't act, I will. Well, what's that? Sounds like a runaway convention to me. And Congress says, oh, my God, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? We can't shut down the government. It's only been done 18 times since 1976, 8 times under Ronald Reagan. But what are we going to do? Our pollsters tell us it's a disaster. We'll lose an election like the last election where we got creamed. So what are we going to do? Well, you didn't get creamed the last election. Wow, that's because Karl Rove saved us. Okay. You're the only ones that have the guts to step up. Are you going to continue playing along with these people who are leading us into a brick wall? Do we believe in what the framers said under Article 1, under Article 2, under Article 3, under Article 4? And what about that Article 5? You know, people talk about the Bill of Rights. I'm all for the Bill of Rights, but the Bill of Rights weren't even in the original Constitution. Article 5 was. That's not superfluous. That's not to be read out of the Constitution. All the branches of the federal government will ignore that part of the Constitution. Both political parties will ignore that part of the Constitution. We have one political party that is fundamentally transforming America, and we have another political party that is watching them fundamentally transform America. So it's really up to you. You're the true conservatives. You're the true constitutionalists. It's up to you to do something about this because you haven't been poisoned by this city. But I can't even conceive of a scenario in which there would be a runaway convention that would have any impact whatsoever. Moreover, you have patriots who are meeting now in advance
to ensure such a ridiculous scenario never happens. Talking about processes and procedures. How many delegates would be sent by the state legislatures? How the state legislatures could recall a delegate who goes off left or right or whatever, maybe a member of the John Birch Society and they didn't know about it at some point. And they can recall that person or what have you. What's being discussed is something you should participate in. When I read that this Assembly of the States is getting together and there's 110 members, I say, 110? Where the hell is everybody? Where is everybody? There should be 2,000. There should be 3,000. They should be quaking in their boots on Capitol Hill. What the hell is going on at Mount Vernon? There's 2,000 or 3,000 state representatives and state legislators meeting right now to figure out what to do to us. That alone would shake up this city.
A healthy attitude toward politics will always be relentlessly cynical. The Conservative doing our part to keep America healthy.
When our water heater broke down last month, it was a nightmare. It took 5 hours for the plumber to show up, and he charged us a couple of $100 just to come out. And then it cost another $1,800 to put in the new water heater. By the time it was all said and done, I felt like I'd been taken. But what else could I do?
The smartest thing you can do is get a home warranty from American Residential Warranty. Their home warranties pay to repair or replace all your major appliances when they break, and they will break, and at the worst possible time. Call American Residential Warranty right now for free information on home warranties starting at just pennies a day. Don't wait for your refrigerator to stop running or your ceiling fans to stop turning. Call American Residential Warranty right now. Ask how you can save up to 50% on washer and dryer coverage. Just call 1-800-790-5960. That's 1-800-790-5960. Again, 1-800-790-5960. Call now.
Limited time offer, 24-month commitment and credit qualification require cancellation fee, auto pay, and paperless billing and other restrictions apply. If you can't see the difference, why pay the difference? Switch to Dish for the best deal in entertainment. Only Dish brings you the best in entertainment for less than $20 a month. Cut the cable and don't get directed. Switch to Dish because at just $19.99, Dish saves you every time you turn on the TV. It's so simple. The same channels cost less with Dish. So since you can't see the difference, don't pay the difference. Switch to Dish for the best deal in entertainment. Get premium movie channels free for 3 months, starting at just $19.99. Dish saves you every time you turn on the TV. Call now to save with Dish. Dial 1-800-600-1645. That's 1-800-600-1645. The same channels for less than $20 a month. Dish. Call 1-800-600-1645 for details.
Hey folks, if you're like me, you don't place a whole lot of trust in today's media for the real truth and facts regarding the volatile world of finance and politics. When I want the real scoop on money, I go to the most trusted source I know, my good friend and colleague, Bob Cardoso. Bob is a noted expert with a PhD in international finance who airs his nationally known, globally syndicated show, Robert Cardoso Live Daily, Monday through Friday, 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific Time. With Bob, you get the right information at the right time from someone who knows his business and can help you make the right decisions concerning yours. Again, Bob airs daily, Monday through Friday, 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit his website at robertcardosolive.com for information regarding stations and topics. That's robertcardosolive.com. Check Bob out. You'll be glad you did.
Attention taxpayers. If you've received a notice from the IRS or state, do not ignore it. It's also a big mistake to try and handle your tax problem on your own. If you owe back taxes, it's a fact that the government has the power to take everything you own, including your home, business, wages, savings, and your freedom. But here's the good news. There's a special toll-free tax hotline set up especially for you. This tax hotline will tell you about new programs that are geared to help you dramatically settle, reduce, or eliminate what you owe. But you have to call now. Take down this number or put it in your cell phone. But call 866-761-0959. 1-866-761-0959. 1-866-761-0959. When you call, you get free information on how you can reduce or eliminate back taxes, including penalties and interest. You can also be helped if you have unfiled returns, a tax lien, wage garnishment, bank levy, or if you have been entered into a payment plan but can't make the payments. Don't make the big mistake in thinking you can ignore or handle your tax problem on your own. You can stop the collection process immediately. Call this special tax hotline today for free info at 1-866-761-0959. That's 1-866-761-0959. 1-866-761-0959.
Hey, all you can do is just tell the truth and trust in the American people that over time they're going to know what the truth is.
Yes, it is time for the truth. Right here, right now. This is the Conservative Syndicate. Real conservative talk from real conservatives. With your host, John Matthews.
The latter-day prophet. Baying against the hypocrisies of our time.
And Joe Hakos.
You want answers. I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
The Conservative Syndicate is comprised of some of the most informed pundits and activists available today. Together, we seek to tear down the imaginary wall, a separation between church and state through education, information, and engagement on the religion of politics and the politics of religion. And now, your host on the globally syndicated Conservative Syndicate, John Matthews and Joe Hakos.
And we're back. Hour 2 right here at the Conservative Syndicate. We're glad you took the time to join us here in our series called Debates and Speeches of Days Past. Great debates and speeches of days past, and we're glad to have you with us. We're glad. In the spirit of Thanksgiving, as we've been saying, we're grateful God has heard our prayers to stop the arterial bleeding known as progressivism, and hope He continues to provide us the path back to becoming once again one nation under God. And so we're providing this series for you just to kind of remind everybody where we came from and where we need to return. Next up on our list of speeches is the debate between conservative icon William F. Buckley and socialist community organizer Sal Alinsky, the man considered by many to be responsible for the likes of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, as well as modern-day community organizing. And following this debate will be author, thinker, and contributor Thomas Sowell speaking at the Hoover Institute in 2010 on his book, Dismantling America. With no further ado, let's get into our first segment here. That is William F. Buckley faces off socialist community organizer Sal Alinsky.
Mr. Saul Alinsky, who was born in Chicago in 1909, will come to your town, as he has to 40 others, to organize the poor. That may mean an end to orderly traffic, might mean sit-ins in City Hall, the cultivation of racial animosities, but Mr. Alinsky claims that's the way to get the toilets fixed in the slum buildings and to bring pride and a sense of dignity to the poor people, something like the sense of dignity which presumably Sitting Bull and his people felt after a massacre. You do have fascinating general notions. For instance, you said, I'll steal before I'll take charity.
No.
Now, suppose I'm the person you're going to steal it from. Would you consult my feelings if I were to say to you before stealing from me, please won't you just take it? Or is it the act of stealing that gives you the satisfaction that you require?
Oh, of course not. You know better than that. It isn't the act of stealing.
Well, then it is charity. Why don't you take charity then?
Well, you know what I meant by charity, just going to getting welfare handouts and...
But welfare handouts are the product of philanthropy.
When I talk about power, and I'm using it strictly as it's defined in Webster's Unabridged as the ability to act, I'm saying that people do not get power except when they take it, or when they're strong enough so that the other side gives it up, or at least gives up its what would be a compromise arrangement. Compromise to me is not a dirty word. I think if I had to define the whole democratic process in one word, I would choose that word. As far as the little example you gave, which is so academic. In the first place, if you're going to steal anything from somebody, he isn't going to be around to say to you, why don't you?
Sometimes they are. It happens every day in New York.
Yeah, I read your column on that one.
Okay. Yeah, you say your money, your money or your life. Jack Benny says, well, I'll have to think it over. But they're often around, and in fact, you have that call it choice. But you do have a feeling. You said a moment ago just now that you only get power if you wrest it from somebody.
Yeah, well, you only get power as a reaction to a threat, I think.
But that's not true.
Oh, of course it is.
Suppose everybody in this room decided to nominate you as our leader. You would then have power over us. This doesn't mean that you wrested it from us.
If everybody in this room decided to nominate me as their leader, I wouldn't have any power to do anything.
It has nothing to do with that. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? If we pledged our allegiance to you.
I'd have a bunch of kids and you. Well, your columns might be of some help for a while.
No, but suppose you just...
I'm looking at it very pragmatically.
Suppose you were in a position to deploy us in any way that you chose, we having decided to give you that power. Why haven't we actually vouchsafed you something?
Well, in the first place, I have never taken that kind of power.
That's not a relevant answer. I'm trying to understand your philosophy here, and I find it difficult to do.
Well, do you want to understand my philosophy?
Desperately.
You do? Well, then, can you sort of be desperately silent for about 1 minute or 2 minutes? All right, I'll go with you.
3.
3. All right, as far as I'm concerned, living in the world as it is, you don't have the choice of what's best. Every judgment that is made on the basis of alternatives. On that basis, I find myself totally committed to the fact that a free and open, what we call, roughly speaking, a democratic society is the best way of life that we have. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm willing to buy the Churchill definition that it may be this a lousy way of life, but it's the best way that we know of. Now, I find, in terms of my own acceptance and understanding of our political situation, I find myself very much in agreement with the thinking of the early revolutionary leaders. I'm thinking of men like Madison J. Hamilton, etc., who I think were extraordinarily politically sophisticated and very well read and very thoughtful in terms of the implications of their actions, and very much aware of the fact that of the world that they were living in. It was not, and they weren't getting it mixed up with the world as they would like it to be. But that this was a jump-off point, that they were heading towards a future where mankind could always be improving or living a happier life, full of potentials for, and you find yourself drifting into cliches here, of achieving his own dignity, freedom, equality, etc. Now, the one thing that they were concerned about in this kind of a life is that while things would always be changing, that basically whatever future there was to the future of an open society, it rested in the fact of having as many people involved as citizens, being able to act as citizens, able to act power.
Freedom is participation in power, I agree, yeah.
All right. And that if we ever ran into a situation in this country where a large sector of our population was disenfranchised politically and economically, etc., and I'm not talking about equality in terms of equal income or anything else of that sort, but if we ever ran into that kind of situation, that it would very well become malignant and bring down the hopes for the future. As a matter of fact, de Tocqueville makes the same point on it in his speculations of future, this new way of life. Now, what is involved here is, and I have to answer you on 2 levels here. One is a commitment to the development of the combination of circumstances in those sectors of our society that are disenfranchised, whereby through organization, which is really a synonym for ability to act in this world, the only reason people ever organize, in fact, in order to be able to put things into practice, ideas that they have, in order to belong, in order to have the power to be part of the...
To maximize their leverage, yeah.
Yeah. Or to get leverage to even begin with, where they don't have any.
You got leverage if you can vote.
Yeah,
if you
but there are large
bread.
sectors of our population that weren't even able to vote.
You talking about Rochester?
No, I'm talking about Mississippi. I'm talking about the South. I'm talking about the whole basis in many sectors of this country in terms of the Civil Rights Revolution. You have to have that. You even have to have it, if I might digress for a moment, on a simple situation that, let's say, people are organized. You do not have that complex, it's called a political complex, and I'm using political strictly in the Greek sense here, whereby through getting together, through having a convention, through having a election of officers, agreement on policies and so forth, that they can turn to other sectors of society and say, here are our representatives. These are the men for you to deal with in the democratic give and take and hauling, decision-making, etc. Without this, which I think is a primary element in the democratic mix, the whole democratic society begins to founder. Let's take Detroit right after the riots that occurred. Let's assume that the powers that be deciding, as they did decide when they got together afterwards, we've got to deal with the representatives of the black ghettos. And they turn to the black ghettos and say, send us your representatives. Who's going to come forward?
I think what's most interesting about yourself, at least most people, is this distinctive appeal that you have to certain types of people who recognize that there is a problem of the poor. Now, you appeal to some of them because you have this disdain for welfarism, as suggested by that ultimatum of yours that you rather steal than receive welfare. Now, this appeals to a lot of people sort of conservative-minded, who are against welfare because they do believe that there is going on in this country a sort of institutionalization of welfare, that we ought to get out of it, and that to be essentially human, you've got to make your own way. So you appeal to them. On the other hand, you appeal, they would be conservatives in a way, you appeal also to liberals and radicals, because yours is a highly non-rhetorical approach. You actually want to organize the poor, and you want to cause them to demand things. And you seem to be utterly either unconscious, or if not unconscious, at least insensible to the normal niceties of approach. When you want something, you simply want it.
It isn't my wanting.
Well, when you figure out they want it, yeah. Now, for instance, you were perfectly prepared, as I understand it, to close down City Hall a while ago in Chicago. Just send wave after wave of people there just to close it down. Just make it impossible for the mayor to go in or the mayor to go out, or the sheriff to go in, the sheriff to go out. And
I've been involved in so many of these things, I'm trying to remember which one that was.
Woodlawn, yeah. And you're perfectly prepared to cause a tremendous amount of commotion out in the suburban areas where landlords live, so as to force the neighbors, as you put it, themselves to put pressure on the delinquent landlords to make those reforms.
Well, it was pure pragmatism, because people only do the right things for the wrong reasons. And I wanted to get the white neighbors to put the pressure on their white slum landlord in order to get rid of the Negro pickets that were in the community. They weren't doing it for equality.
That's once again, it seems to me that you obtrude into the discussion your own essential cynicism.
That's not cynicism, that's realism.
No, it isn't.
Oh,
it isn't.
come
no,
on.
I know a lot of people do things they don't want to do at all. And they do them simply because they think it's the right thing to do. I'll introduce you to some, if you like, later on.
Are they all conservative?
No, they're of every stripe. A lot of them are liberals, some of them radicals, some of them are communists. Can I quote you exactly? Quote, "There is no evolution without revolution, and there are no revolutions without conflict, and this is the line which separates liberals from radicals."
Where'd you get that from?
Harper's.
All right.
I'll show it to you after if you like.
No, I'll buy it.
Yeah. Now, isn't this once again one more expression of your belief that what progress is made by some sort of a Hegelian sense of controversy, conflict, antithesis, and so on? You just finished discussing the fact that there exists in Chicago now something that is substantially better than was there 5-6 years ago. And then you say, don't you understand, the reason it came into being was because of the Woodlawn operation. And sure, the Woodlawn operation involved conflict. It necessarily had to. And I'm asking whether or not progress can't be made without a conflict.
I don't believe so. I think that the most insidious, the most subversive force that has ever entered the American scene has been what I would call Madison Avenue public relations, middle-class moral hygiene, which has made the word conflict a nasty word, and controversy a very nasty word, so that people are fired off of mass media for controversy.
But don't you think that reason... Well, I obviously, I have a stake in the toleration of controversy. But I want to ask you this. Can't one achieve progress by reason? Or must it be by a conflict of force?
Even on the basis of reason. The moment you come up with a new idea, it promptly challenges the prevailing sacred cow of the older idea, and you've got a conflict going on. I think that controversy is the matrix of everything creative that comes out of life.
We got Medicare in this country, and we got as a result of a lot of discussion. Now, mightn't Alinsky students have felt that you need to shoot a few doctors or let a few people die for lack of medical attention before you'd have the kind of conflict that's necessary to midwife Medicare? And I'm asking, why can't you have...
I've been fascinated by your eyes in previous shows I've watched, Anna. Will you look at me and tell me whether you believe what you're saying?
Well, of course, no. What I'm trying to do is extract from you disbelief in what people understand you to be believing. Perhaps because I'm terribly refreshed that you're constantly shocked that people at quotations I throw at you of things you've said.
I'm not shocked.
I'm delighted.
No, I'm
shows great progress.
I'm just correcting some of the misquotations.
All right. If you're saying, therefore, that conflict is what we're doing right now, then I agree with you that conflict is probably necessary to the changing of any point of view. But most people understand you to be saying something much more
and what they're understanding is closer to it than just our discussion. I don't want to get take a pass on.
Yeah.
I'm saying very unreservedly that all progress comes as a response to a threat, and the reaction to the threat is when you get progress. I'm saying that that all actions of history have come that way.
That's
it doesn't necessarily have to be violence.
Why? But that's not true. What was the threat? What is the relevant threat, let's say, when John decides to marry Jane?
That was a debate between conservative icon William F. Buckley and socialist community organizer Sal Alinsky, the man considered by many to be responsible for the likes of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, as well as modern organizing from the socialist leftist slant. We'll be right back with Thomas Sowell giving a talk on his book, Dismantling America, given at Hoover Institute in 2010.
Talk Radio, WRS Cleveland.
Hey, I'll make you a deal. Give me 60 seconds and I'll give you directions to the Fountain of Youth. Okay, I'm joking. Well, kind of joking. No fountains, but youth, I got Nature's Youth and their premier anti-aging product, Nature's Youth RSF. With your sensible diet and exercise plan, Nature's Youth RSF can help you look and feel better. RSF is an all-natural amino acid supplement that supports your body to naturally increase HGH levels without any synthetic hormones. And elevated HGH levels can contribute to increased energy, improved libido, reduced body fat, and improved exercise capacity. Let's be honest. Who doesn't want to look and feel younger? Visit the newly designed website at naturesyouth.com or call 800-333-6923. That's 800-333-6923 and like them on Facebook and you'll be included in contests and exclusive offers. What a deal. Oh, speaking of deals, my time's about up. 800-333-6923 or naturesyouth.com. Who needs a fountain anyway? Call today.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
When I had a heart attack at 42, I was not sure what the future held. But a year later, the doctors could find nothing wrong with me and took me off all my medication. What did I do? I took a herbal mixture of garlic, cayenne, and a few other herbs mixed in liquid form. I now call this Extendovite. I would have never believed that a few simple herbs could actually change my life like they did. Now it's your turn to see what the powers of garlic and cayenne can do for you. For only $69.95 plus shipping and handling for a 2-month supply of either capsules or liquid, you too can begin on your path to better health. For more information, call 1-877-928-8822. That's 1 877-928-8822 or visit our website at heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
I've owned my company for 14 years now, and I can tell you that payroll is a 4-letter word. I hate doing it. It eats up hours I don't have, and it costs me money I could be saving. But my accountant's too expensive, and I'm not sure who to call, but I know I need help.
We're Paychex, and we take all the hassles out of small business payroll. We save you time and money. It's easy. Call, fax, or give us your payroll information securely online, and we take care of the rest. We calculate the correct taxes, manage payments and direct deposits. We even send out your checks. Payroll doesn't need to be a 4-letter word anymore. We're so sure that we can save you time and money that we'll give you a month's payroll free. Just for calling 877-663-3830. Get 1 month's payroll for free. Call Paychex right now. 877-663-3830. That's 877-663-3830.
Hey, I don't back anybody unless I believe in them. And I do believe in the value of investing in gold and silver. And the company I trust to buy my gold and silver from is Swiss America. I've been working with them for nearly a decade. I trust them, and you can too. Swiss America will help you sort through and find the best options available when you're considering investing in gold and silver coins. Listen, for over 30 years, Swiss America has been offering Americans what they want in their investments: safety, liquidity, quality, reliability, and a potential profit. Gold and silver have a place in every investor's portfolio. So, why not let Swiss America help you diversify your investment portfolio now? Call now for free information. 800-978-3907, 800-978-3907, 800-978-3907, 800-978-3907.
Hey, Bugsy, you hear the news about Vinny?
Yeah, it's a real shame. He owed money to the IRS and they finally caught up with him.
Just like Al Capone.
If the IRS can get to Capone, imagine what they can do to little old Vinny, huh?
Poor cat, he was on top of the world. Then bada boom, bada bing.
What Vinny needs now is an offer he can't refuse.
Hey, you got a tax problem? Does the IRS claim you owe them a bunch of dough? They can get you too. So call the tax relief line now and learn if you qualify to negotiate your $10,000 plus IRS tax debt for up to a 75% savings. Don't be like Al or Vinny and get busted. Make this free call now. Learn how you may be able to pay the IRS less.
Call now. 866-657-8474. 866-657-8474. 866-657-8474. 866-657-8474.
Welcome to Uncommon Knowledge. I'm Peter Robinson. Be sure to follow us on Twitter, if you would, at twitter.com/UNCKnowledge. Twitter.com/UNCKnowledge. Comment, ask questions, suggest guests. A fellow at the Hoover Institution, Dr. Thomas Sowell has taught economics, intellectual history, and social policy at such institutions as Cornell, Amherst, and UCLA. The author of more than a dozen books, Dr. Sowell has just published a collection of essays, Dismantling America. Tom, welcome.
Good to be here.
Segment 1, Decline and Fall. From Dismantling America, quote, "The collapse of a civilization is not just the replacement of rulers or institutions with new rulers and new institutions. It is the destruction of a whole way of life and the painful and sometimes pathetic attempts of rebuilding amid the ruins. Is that where America is headed? I believe it is." Close quote. Now, whatever troubles we have, it's still the richest, most powerful nation in the world. We're still fundamentally at peace. Some soldiers in Iraq, some soldiers in Afghanistan, some in Germany, some in South Korea, but relatively small wars by historical standards in Afghanistan and Iraq. How can you say such a thing?
Well, that description would also have fit the United States on December 6, 1941. So it's like the argument that was used when I used to question whether Social Security was fiscally sound. And I said, Social Security has never missed a payment. It's never been a day late or a dollar short. I said, it's always true right up to the moment of collapse.
Again, from Dismantling America. While the Obama administration is not the root cause of the ominous dangers that face this country at home and abroad. It is the embodiment, the personification, and the culmination of dangerous trends that began decades ago. How does the President of the United States embody dangerous trends? How do you see this man?
Oh, my gosh. I see him as someone who all his life has been associated with and part of a group of people who fundamentally don't believe in the principles of this country. Not only people, the most obvious example, obviously, is Jeremiah Wright. People like Bill Ayers, whom he's, tried to disavow. But people who fundamentally think that we're on the wrong track, we have the wrong principles, and we need to be changed, whether we want to be or not.
Tom, you mentioned Jeremiah Wright, his pastor at a church in Chicago. You mentioned Bill Ayers, who was a former member of the
Weather Underground.
The Weather Underground, exactly. What about his formation, his intellectual formation at Columbia, Harvard Law School?
Well, as he himself says, that he always sought out the most radical people. He worked as a community organizer. I don't think most people stop and think, what does a community organizer do? He doesn't organize a community.
It's not bake sales. It's not bake sales he's organizing.
No, he's not telling people in the community how to shop better and stuff like that. He is mobilizing all the resentments, organizing them in order to put them into a battle to get what they want from other people.
Now, you talk about Barack Obama as embodying dangerous trends, quote, that began decades ago.
Oh, yes.
When? This is during your lifetime, during your adult lifetime?
Yes, and perhaps even a little earlier. But I think what you see in the most clearly, I think, in the academic world, are people who don't think that this country is a great country. One example of a colleague of mine who teaches at Harvard, after 9/11, put an American flag on his car. And his colleague said, "What is that for?" When I visited Berkeley in the aftermath of 9/11, when there were flags everywhere, I did not see one flag on the Berkeley campus on any of those expensive houses. When I was coming back from Berkeley, the first American flag I saw was in a low-income black neighborhood in Oakland. These are people who consider themselves citizens of the world, and that the rest of us are so lucky to have them here to change America, so that people like us don't have a voice. And of course, the whole way that Obama has operated with these enormous bills that no one has ever had time to read, that they rush through, where they're putting people in power who don't have to go through the confirmation process, so that we don't find out what they're like except if there's an expose on Fox News or someplace. His whole thing has been to circumvent the American public in order to put in things that they clearly don't want, as shown by the polls, as shown by this recent repudiation in Missouri.
All right, that's a question. Barack Obama won by about 7 percentage points. That's the biggest for a Democratic presidential candidate. Bill Clinton won by 8. FDR won by big. But he's in the top 3 Democratic finishers in the last 7 decades. Barack Obama is. So here's the question. You've described him, you've described the academic elites. To what extent the American people voted for him?
Yes.
To what extent do you see a corrosion of values among the American people themselves on the one hand? On the other hand, to what extent is there just a kind of creeping takeover by an elite that fails to share, that is opposed to the values that most Americans share?
There's both things. And I think part of the reason so many people voted for him was that what they got through the media was so filtered that they poo-pooed this man having been a member of a church run by a ranting racist, because they wanted to believe that he was going to be a unifier. Community organizers don't unify; they divide, they polarize. That's how they get what they want. I never thought of Acorn as a unifying force in American life. And this man is not. But of course, if they don't know that, then of course they may vote for him.
So it's the press, it's Barack Obama and the administration, it's the elites at academic institutions.
But it's not just a thing that happened now. Long before Barack Obama's name became known, there was this attitude, essentially repudiating this the principles of the country. I mean, it started, I think, with Woodrow Wilson, who was the first president of the United States to openly say that the Constitution, needed to be superseded. And he didn't mean that there needed to be amendments to the Constitution, which anybody can be for, but that the courts should do this. In other words, to circumvent the voting public, and put in the things that the judges think ought to be put in, irrespective of what the Constitution says.
Segment 2, Dismantling America. 2 quotations. The first comes from your book, Dismantling America. This segment is on marriage. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, you write, said that the life of the law has not been logic but experience. Vast numbers of laws have accumulated and evolved over the centuries based on experience with male-female unions. There is no reason why all those laws should be transferred willy-nilly to a different kind of union, one with neither the inherent tendency to produce children or the inherent asymmetries of relationships between people of different sexes. That's quotation 1. Here's quotation 2. U.S. District Judge Vaughn Walker, ruling in Perry v. Schwarzenegger on August 4th. Quote, gender no longer forms an essential part of marriage. Close quote. I just dropped that in your lap to see what you do with it, Dr. Sowell.
Well, the most important decision is always who makes the decision. And so the question is not what is the role of gender for this judge to decide. But since we are presumably still, for the moment at least, a self-governing nation, it's for the voting public to decide. And so the fact that he feels that way, that's wonderful. Let him vote that way in the privacy of the voting booth. But let him not say that this is now the law of the land just because he happens to think that way.
Tom, let me give you just another couple of quotations from Judge Vaughn Walker's ruling the other day. Judge Walker, the traditional understanding of marriage represents, quote, nothing more than an artifact of a foregone notion that men and women fulfill different roles in civic life. Close quote. That's an artifact.
Well, one might say that Judge Walker is an artifact of what goes on in academia and particularly in the law schools. But again, the question is, whose decision is that? Is that a judge is there to decide that the rest of us, that what we believe is just not worth thinking about? Or is he there to carry out the laws that have been passed by the duly elected representatives?
Tom, you know that during this trial, he had a long fact-finding phase in which one sociologist and expert after another came in to testify about the roles of genders, the state of marriage in the 21st century, and so forth. You just brush all that aside?
No, none of that is a substitute for we the people, which is what the Constitution is about. When I could give you an impressive list of people who have said absurd things. In fact, if you were to make a list of all the absurd things said by brilliant people, it would be longer than the Encyclopedia Britannica.
All right. One more from Judge Walker here. Quote, the evidence shows conclusively that moral and religious views form the only basis for the belief that same-sex couples are different from opposite-sex couples. Close quote.
Well, it may be conclusive to him, but again, the question is, whose decision is it? Obviously, it's not conclusive to other people, or else the proposition that he was ruling on would never have passed.
And been passed with the votes of 7 million Californians,
yes,
by the way. All right. So let me ask you, just step back from that a little bit and ask you this question. How did we go in the space of a couple of decades, maybe 3, but I think probably closer to 2, from an America in which the notion of same-sex marriage was literally unthinkable. That is to say, it was in nobody's head. So outlandish that it never occurred to anyone. 2, a sitting judge, federal judge, named to the federal bench, by the way, by George H.W. Bush.
Heaven help us.
Coming out with an opinion like this. What happened to the legal regime, to the social to the mores? This is
why I say that Obama is really the culmination of a trend. He didn't do this by himself. That there was a notion out there, a set of notions really, about the country, about what was right, and about who should make what decisions. Those notions were out there, before he ever became a public figure. But now that and I think what you saw was an erosion of the confidence in the country and the country's culture, its principles and so forth, and all of this happened. And what is happening now is what was just an erosion, sort of almost uncoordinated and so on, to a deliberate attempt on his part to change the country in fundamental ways.
Now, you talked about Woodrow Wilson with a certain kind of rot setting in with Woodrow Wilson and the progressives, the sort of elitism. I, Woodrow Wilson, know far better than that non-entity James Madison who drafted the Constitution. Right, all right. But in more recent times that you and I can remember, we had Ronald Reagan and the sense that somehow the country was coming back. How do we go from Ronald Reagan to Barack Obama? How do you go from a reassertion of what seems to be fundamental faith in the country to a Judge Vaughn Walker? What happened in the space of just 2 or 3 decades?
Well, I think it started immediately with Reagan's successor, George H.W. Bush, no doubt a decent man, an honorable man, but one who disdained what he called this vision thing. In other words, that an overarching sense of principles that you'd be fighting for. To me, I think one of the moments that sort of gave a clue was when, during one of the presidential debates, when Bush was looking at his watch.
Right.
I can't imagine Ronald Reagan, or any Democrat for that matter, looking at his watch during Bush was, and I think the first moment that you saw a glimpse of this was when Bush first took office, Bush 41, and started talking about a kinder and gentler America. That it's kinder and gentler to tax the taxpayers in order to make it easier on people who have not lived up to their responsibilities. You see that right now carried to extremes in this administration, where people who never took out a $700,000 loan in their lives now have to subsidize people who did take out a $700,000 mortgage loan and couldn't afford it.
So it is the case that either you have a Ronald Reagan in place fighting for American principles, and Ronald Reagans don't come along that often, or even a Republican and temperamentally conservative president such as George H.W. Bush will come under such cultural and political pressures that the drift to the left that will continue.
Yes, well, what you generally have had in recent times is people moving to the left rapidly under Democrats and slowly under Republicans.
All right. Segment 3, Dismantling the Culture. From your book, Tom, Dismantling America, quote, "The great escape of our times is escape from personal responsibility," close quote. What do you mean?
Well, I think that the idea of personal responsibility is more or less off the table. It's passé in many places. Again, going back to, say, the housing situation, that people took out mortgages that they couldn't afford, and that now people who didn't take out mortgages they couldn't afford are now expected to pay to bail them out. It's insane.
But you don't. They were duped by dishonest mortgage brokers. No?
Oh, there was enough dishonesty to go around. We needn't single out mortgage brokers. No, that's the narrative. The fact of the matter is that speculators took advantage. See, these things are put in these laws and policies are put into place, saying this is going to help the poor and the downtrodden. But the question is, who actually benefits from this? Speculators benefited from this more than any poor or any downtrodden. A speculator could come in, claim any income he wanted to claim in order to buy 3 or 4 houses. Nobody would verify the income. He would get them at teaser rates like 2% per year, and he didn't worry about that going up later because he was going to sell a house beforehand. And so a lot of that was in there. The other thing is that it's a very complicated financial situation. But the cold fact is, if the mortgages had continued to be paid, we wouldn't have had the mortgage crisis. So the fundamental reason for the crisis is that the mortgages weren't paid, and the fundamental reason they weren't paid is that they were made under conditions that made it unlikely that they would ever be repaid. And you knew that going in.
Right. Losing a sense of personal responsibility, you write, in Dismantling America places, quote, a whole society in jeopardy. How is that the case? How do you draw a line from the mortgage crisis to the dismantling of the entire country?
Well, I think if you don't have a sense of personal responsibility, and what you have is the government taking money from people who are personally responsible and giving it to people who are irresponsible, or in other cases corrupt, that's not a viable situation for the long term. You're going to have ever more people being ever more irresponsible. As is happening now. I mean, in the wake of the mortgage crisis, they've raised the limit that the Federal Housing Administration will insure from about 360,000 to 720-some thousand. So they've doubled the policy that got us into problems in the first place.
Tom, you, on personal responsibility, and you and I have talked about this before. You spent part of your boyhood in Harlem.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, most of it.
All right. Tell me a little bit about the Harlem that you knew as a boy. Was it safe at night?
Yes. When I would wake up in the middle of the night, I would get up, get dressed, and go out to a corner newsstand where there was a little old man who was white selling newspapers in Harlem at midnight. Now today, he and I would both be taken in for mental observation.
How were the schools in the Harlem of your boyhood?
Oh, they were among the best in the country.
Public schools.
Public schools. Oh, I only went to public schools. I have data on the actual test scores of kids in Harlem. They were almost identical with the kids in the Lower East Side, who are almost all white. Nobody was concerned about giving me school lunches and stuff like that. They didn't ask me whether my home was broken or not. They just told me what I was supposed to do, and they made damn sure I did it.
Do your homework, get your assignments in.
That's it.
Tom, what happened between the Harlem of your boyhood, which would be what, late 40s to the mid 50s or so?
40s. I went my first school I attended in Harlem was 1939.
Oh, real? All right. So you grew up you were there during the Second World War.
Oh, yes.
All right. So take me from the Harlem of your boyhood in this theme of personal responsibility to the Harlem of the 70s and 80s.
Oh, there you got the teachers became social workers, social theorists. They became propagandists for all kinds of new fads. And I guess the test was whether they made the teachers feel like it was exciting and it made the students feel good about themselves. So, of course, they end up not with no education that's worth talking about.
And what about the crime rates?
Oh my goodness, the crime rates are much lower. I gave a talk.
Much lower when you were a boy, but
yes.
So what do you attribute the rise in crime?
Oh, the rise in the idea that we have to look for the root causes of crime rather than put the bad guys in jail.
All right. So there's the dissolution of the sense of personal responsibility that the teacher is to teach, the child is to do his homework, criminals are to be picked up and put in jail.
Yes.
Now, Harlem today is pretty safe. It has enjoyed the increase in safety or the drop in crime rates associated with the rest of New York that began under Rudy Giuliani. The Harlem economy is pretty robust. And Harlem is now home to some 24 charter schools. So what I'm trying to do, Tom, is cheer you up. I'm trying to...
Well, I need it.
I'm trying to point to evidence of the possibility of renewal, of rebirth. And that to suggest
I never denied that there was possibility for renewal and rebirth. So I haven't said it. In fact, even in my book, I say, the one good thing is that nothing is inevitable until it happens. But I also point out that there were periods of improvement as the Roman Empire moved toward its last days.
Right. All right. Segment 4: Dismantling Self-Government. Again, Tom, from Dismantling America. Quote: Nothing so epitomizes President Obama's contempt for American values and traditions as ramming two bills, the stimulus package and the health care bill, this would be, through Congress in his first year, each bill more than 1,000 pages long, too fast for either to be read, much less discussed. Close quote. Stimulus package, the health care bill, actually, I looked this up, came to more than 2,000 pages. Yes. On the other hand, the American people elected Barack Obama. They gave him big Democratic majorities in both the House and the Senate. Why shouldn't Barack Obama and his Democratic allies enact whatever they want as they want?
Oh, whatever they want is one thing. As they want is something else. As they want means circumventing the whole political system of the country that's meant to safeguard, a self-governing country. If you never learn what kind of laws are being passed, then you've lost a great deal of your ability to influence what happens to the people who rule. I mean, the thing that this whole business with rushing these bills through, it reminds me. The only thing I can find in parallel in history is the Norman conquerors who would publish their laws in England in French for an English-speaking nation.
Dismantling America once again. What are the Beltway politicians buying with all the hundreds of billions of dollars they are spending? They are buying what politicians are most interested in, power. Explain that notion.
There are things that the government is authorized to do under the Constitution and other things that they're not authorized to do. But by simply spending a vast amount of money, you acquire the right to do them. For example, you can fire the head of General Motors simply because you spent all that money rescuing General Motors. There are all kinds of programs that the federal government imposes on the states, which they have no authority to do, but they impose them because they make the receipt of federal money contingent on doing what they tell you in Washington. And so the powers that were set out in the Constitution and limited become expanded by this process.
Now, I mentioned that we've had some questions for you submitted from people who follow the show on Twitter and Facebook. Here's one from a fellow called Albert Fuchs on Facebook. And he points, I'll paraphrase because it's a little bit long here. Milton Friedman said, a major reason for the growth of government is that special interests are concentrated, but the general interest is diffuse. And Tocqueville warned that American democracy would be in danger when the public learned it could use the ballot box to vote itself money.
Yeah.
Now, both of these get at what you were talking about just a moment ago. But both of these are structural points. It has been the case since the Constitution was enacted that special interests are concentrated and the general interest is diffuse, or that politicians could in effect purchase votes.
Yes.
Why do we have the problem now? What has happened in recent
very good
decades?
question. Because one of the constraints are the values of the public, and when the values of the public are constantly eroded in the schools and in the press, elsewhere, then these other tendencies can have a wider field of play.
Mm-hmm. So what's a good index for the values of the public? Would you say, for example, that it might be federal spending or federal debt, where for 2 centuries you get a fairly flat, slowly climbing line, goes up during the Civil War, comes back down, and then beginning about in the 70s, it just takes off.
Yes.
So it's not FDR, it's not the Great Deal, it's not the 30s, it's the 70s? When do things begin to go catastrophically wrong?
I would say it was the Great Depression. Most people are unaware that prior to the 1930s, the federal government never intervened in the economy to get us out of a recession. The economy recovered on its own and kept going. But FDR really broke down a great deal of that sense of independence. I mean, there was a time, I think most Americans would have felt insulted to have it thought that they wanted somebody else to pay their medical bills. They don't feel so insulted anymore.
Mm. Mm. All right. This is what I'm trying to get at. This. On the one hand, you've got an elite that is effectively engaging in a slow-motion hijacking of America. That's a crude way, but one way of putting it. But at the other hand, you've got more and more Americans who either like the idea of being hijacked, are too worn out to fight it anymore. I'm trying to get your sense of the extent to which the public itself is dispirited.
Well, the ideas of the 60s, the idea that if you had a grievance, you didn't have to obey the law.
Historian Paul Ray of Hillsdale College, he grants, we did a shoot with Paul Ray, and he grants a great deal of what you've been saying here, Tom. But, now listen to Paul Ray. Quote, the political moment in which we live is a moment of great, great hope, close quote. How so? Because by overreaching so dramatically, President Obama has roused the American people to reclaim their old liberties. The Obama administration, Paul Ray argues, this is a quotation, is, quote, a gift to the friends of liberty, close quote.
I hope he is right and that I am wrong.
And you don't, are you encouraged by the Tea Party, by the polls that show that?
Oh, yes. But there is such a thing as a point of no return. And I think then the real question is whether he can take us there. And that's why I think that the fall 2010 elections, on my judgment, one of the most, if not the most important election we've ever held. Because if he doesn't get stopped in this fall's election, I don't know how he'll ever be stopped. For one thing, people talk about his falling in the polls. He's still in the 40s. If he can somehow make millions of illegal immigrants legal and voters before 2012, he can get a second term. And I doubt if there's, I see that as a point of no return.
So, getting some substantial portion of the 12 million illegal immigrants in this country the vote.
Yes.
That would be a direction, step toward the point of no return.
Yes.
I'm trying, domestically, what other, is Obamacare is reversible, or at least its ill effects can be contained. It all comes down to November 2010.
Oh, this year. If it's not stopped now, it won't be stopped.
All right. So November 2nd, 4th, I can't remember which is election day. You have one specific date in American history which you can name right now that you consider absolutely crucial.
Oh, absolutely. It's almost like the great military battles, Charles Martel at Tours. Yes,
732. Yes. I actually looked that up just yesterday for a separate reason.
Or the siege of Vienna in 1532. Had those things gone the other way, it would be a totally different world today.
We're into segment 5, which I had in my notes titled "The Point of No Return." You mentioned in Dismantling America such a point in foreign policy. Let me quote you, Tom. Iran is advancing step by step toward nuclear weapons, while the Europeans wring their hands and the United Nations engages in leisurely discussion. When Osama bin Laden has nuclear weapons, the choice will be between knuckling under and watching American cities blasted off the face of the earth. That is the point of no return, and we are drifting toward it.
Yes.
Close quote. Nothing you've seen since you wrote that causes you to reconsider or mute your views?
No. I was appalled earlier this year when I think it was Gates or someone else in the Pentagon leaked the fact that there were no contingency military plans for stopping Iran from getting nuclear weapons. And now recently, there have been some talk that there are now plans. Now, I have no idea whether that means that there really are plans or whether they see an election coming and they'd better create the impression that they have more plans. Because they've covered themselves very well because they have international conferences over Iran. They have resolutions in the UN. These are what I call elaborate ways of doing nothing.
Well, we've got, let me quote you, Michael Barone, the journalist. Michael Barone. This is just from a couple of days ago. Quote, Time magazine's Joe Klein and the American interests' Walter Russell Mead suggested to me that the Obama administration is seriously considering a military strike against Iran. Now comes further evidence in an opinion article in the Washington Post by Stephen Simon and Ray Takei. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. Simon worked in Bill Clinton's National Security Council, and Takei is described as a former advisor to the Obama administration. Their article takes seriously the possibility that the president will order such an attack. And your answer to that is, that could be nothing but cheap leaking.
Yeah, I'll believe it when I see it.
All right.
In fact, he doesn't have to do that. All he has to do is not interfere if the Israelis want to do it. I saw someplace where Saudi Arabia has indicated that the Israelis could fly over Saudi Arabia to get there. And it's ironic that they would have to go around Iraq and fly over Saudi Arabia because the American planes patrol Iraq and presumably would shoot down the Israeli planes on their way to Iran.
Let me ask you this. Do you consider it then the duty of the President of the United States to prevent Iran from gaining nuclear?
Absolutely.
That's clear to you.
Absolutely. I don't know what earthly chance we have or the Western world has once Iran has those weapons. It took two weapons.
What about this notion of deterrence? It worked during the Cold War.
The Russians did not want us to blast Moscow off the map. The Iranians have said themselves, going back to Ayatollah Khomeini, that their top priority is not Iran, but Allah. And so if they get into a war in which Iran is knocked out, but they then strike a blow for Allah, they're happy with that.
And failing any serious sign that the United States would attack, would you say that it's the duty of the Prime Minister of Israel and his cabinet to order an attack?
Oh, absolutely. But think of how pathetic this is, that the fate of the United States of America would be in the hands of a country smaller than Lake Michigan.
One final time from Dismantling America. To follow Rome, one of the greatest civilizations of all time, as it degenerated and fractured, is especially painful in view of the parallels to what is happening in America in our own times. Close quote.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in to this edition of the Conservative Syndicate, the nationally acclaimed, globally syndicated, politically incorrect talk show that seeks to tear down the imaginary wall of separation between church and state. We want to make you aware you can find and access all our show archives at our website, theconservativesyndicate.net, as well as our broadcast stations and times. That's theconservativesyndicate.net. We so appreciate you taking the time to tune in, and we so look forward to continuing to bring you the best in uncompromised talk radio available on the net today. And remember, folks, it doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down in life. It only matters how many times you get up. I'm John Matthews, along with Joe Hako, signing off until next time right here at the Conservative Syndicate. God bless you, and may God continue to bless America.